The city was a graveyard, Sarah realized as she surveyed the devastation around her, the once vibrant streets now littered with the bodies of the dead. Towering skyscrapers stood as silent sentinels, their windows shattered and blackened by fire overhead. The sky was choked with a swirling mass of dark wings, circling like vultures waiting to feast on the last remnants of humanity. Clutching her young son Liam tightly, Sarah crouched in the shadows, her heart pounding in her ears. The screams and moans of the infected filled the air, a nightmarish symphony that never ceased. Liam whimpered softly, burying his face in her chest, and she knew they couldn't hide forever. Soon the undead would pick up their scent and come shambling towards their hiding place. "We have to keep moving," Sarah whispered, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. Liam nodded shakily, and they emerged from their refuge, joining the desperate flow of survivors fleeing down the cracked and rubble-strewn streets. Sarah scanned the chaos around them, searching for any sign of the rumored bunker that held the key to a cure, a last bastion of hope in this nightmarish world. The horde was closing in. She could feel their presence like a physical weight pressing down on her. Liam stumbled, and she caught him, hauling him back to his feet as the first of the zombies lurched into view, shambling figures with rotting flesh and hollow eyes, their jaws gaping open in inhuman screeches. They were surrounded, no way out. In that moment, Sarah made a decision, one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Shoving Liam towards an open doorway, she turned to face the horde alone. "Ill, hold them off," she said, fighting back tears. "Just run, Liam, don't look back." Liam opened his mouth to protest, but Sarah cut him off. "Not another word, go now," she said with a fierceness that brooked no argument. Liam hesitated for a heartbeat, then turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows. Sarah steeled herself, gripping the pipe she had been using as a makeshift weapon. The zombies were almost upon her now, their stench choking her, their clawed hands reaching out to tear her apart. She swung the pipe with all her strength, slamming it into the first skull that came within reach. The creature crumpled to the ground, but two more took its place. This is it, she thought, as the horde surged forward. Closing her eyes, she swung the pipe again and again, feeling the impact as bone cracked and flesh tore. But the zombies kept coming, relentless and unstoppable. She was going to die here alone in this forsaken city, her only comfort the knowledge that Liam was safe. Then in the midst of the chaos, a glimmer of hope, a distant beacon beckoning her onwards. Rumor had it that deep beneath the ruins of the city lay a secret bunker, a last stronghold against the apocalypse. If Liam could reach it, he might find the cure, the salvation they so desperately needed. With a primal scream, Sarah redoubled her efforts, hacking and slashing her way through the horde, her focus narrowed to a single goal: get Liam to that bunker. No matter the cost, the zombies were relentless, and she felt her strength begin to wane, but she refused to give in, not when her son's life hung in the balance. In the end, it was the weight of their numberless bodies that overwhelmed her, dragging her down into the darkness as the last of her energy ebbed away. But even as the undead closed in, Sarah clung to the hope that Liam had escaped, that he would make it to the bunker and find a way to stop this nightmare before it consumed the world. Liam ran blindly through the deserted streets, his mother's anguished cries still ringing in his ears. The weight of her sacrifice threatened to crush him, but he forced himself to keep moving, driven by a single desperate need to survive. Rounding a corner, he collided with a group of armed survivors who leveled their weapons at him, hands shaking. Liam raised his own in a gesture of surrender. "Please, I need help, my mother," she's. The leader, a grizzled man with a hard gaze, cut him off. "We've got our own problems, kid," he growled, shoving past Liam towards the sound of the zombies. But then his eyes narrowed as he took in Liam's pale, terrified face. "Wait a minute," he said. "You look like you've seen hell. What happened?" In halting words, Liam explained about the bunker and his mother's sacrifice. The man listened, his expression unreadable, then glanced back at his companions. "All right, let's move out," he ordered. "We're bringing him with us." Bewildered Liam allowed himself to be ushered into the group's fortified compound, a sprawling complex surrounded by towering walls and guarded by a small army of armed sentries. Inside was a bustling hive of activity as people rushed to and fro, some caring for the wounded, others preparing weapons and supplies. The grizzled leader introduced himself as Gus, the last surviving member of a community that had once thrived here. Now they were little more than a ragtag band of holdouts, clinging to the hope of reclaiming the city from the undead Liam, listened in growing awe as Gus explained their mission to uncover the truth behind the outbreak and find a way to stop it. "You lost your mother," he said, placing a weathered hand on Liam's shoulder, "but maybe we can help you find what she's sacrificed for the bunker you spoke of. There's a rumor it might hold the key to a cure." A glimmer of hope flared in Liam's chest, and he nodded eagerly. "Anything I can do to help," he said, his voice shaky. Gus studied him for a long moment, then nodded in return. "Well, you're one of us now, kid," he said with a grim smile, "and that's what we intend to do, find that cure and wipe these damn zombies off the face of the earth." Over the next few days, Liam was put to work alongside the other survivors, learning to fight, defend their compound, and scavenge for supplies. It was grueling labor, but he welcomed the distraction, anything to keep his mind off the horrors he had witnessed. As they prepared to venture out into the ruins, Gus pulled Liam aside, his expression serious. "Listen, kid," he said, "I know you're eager to find that cure, but you need to understand the stakes. If we fail, the whole world could be lost. There's no room for mistakes out there." Liam swallowed hard, the weight of that responsibility heavy on his shoulders. "But I have to try," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have to find out what happened to my mother." Gus studied him for a long moment, then nodded and clapped him on the shoulder. "All right then," he said, "we're counting on you. We all are." With that, he turned and led the way out of the compound, leaving Liam to take a steadying breath before following. The streets were dark and silent, save for the occasional moans of the undead Liam, kept close to the others, his heart pounding as they advanced cautiously towards the rumored location of the bunker. But as they drew nearer, a new sound reached his ears, one that chilled him to the bone. A chilling revelation echoed in his mind. The fate of the entire world rested on their shoulders, and he knew that failure was not an option. The moans grew louder as Liam and the others approached the dilapidated building rumored to house the elusive bunker. Gus signaled for them to take cover as they crept closer, weapons at the ready. Peering around the corner, Liam felt his heart sink. The entrance was swarming with zombies. "They're guarding it," Gus growled, his face set in a grim expression. "We must have been right about what's inside." Liam swallowed hard, watching as the undead horde shambled back and forth, their rotting forms blocking the only way forward. This is it, he thought, the moment of truth, the chance to find the cure and avenge his mother. But how were they going to get past those creatures? Gus must have read the fear in his eyes, because he gave Liam's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Don't worry, kid," he said, "we'll get through this together. Just stay close and do exactly as I say." With a nod, Liam tightened his grip on the machete he had been issued, steeling himself for the fight to come. "On three," Gus barked, then surged forward, the others hot on his heels. The battle was brutal and chaotic as the survivors hacked and slashed their way through the undead mob. Liam fought with a desperate ferocity fueled by the memory of his mother's sacrifice. But for every zombie that fell, two more seemed to take its place, and he felt his strength beginning to wane. Just as they were about to be overwhelmed, a deafening explosion rocked the building. A grenade, Gus shouted, gesturing towards the smoke-filled entrance. "Take cover." Liam didn't need to be told, twice throwing himself to the ground as debris rained down around them. When the dust settled, Liam cautiously climbed to his feet, surveying the scene. Before him stood a new group of survivors, armed to the teeth. They must have been the ones who set off the grenade. Gus and the others tensed, readying their weapons, but the newcomers simply stared them down, their expressions grim. Well, the leader, a broad-shouldered man with a scar-ravaged face, drawled, "What do we have here? Looks like you've got something I want." Liam felt a chill run down his spine at the man's tone, cold and predatory. He glanced over at Gus, who had gone deathly pale, his knuckles white as he gripped his rifle. "The bunker," he breathed, "the cure, you know where it is." The scared man grinned, exposing a mouthful of yellowed teeth. "That's right," he purred, "and I'm gonna make sure I get my hands on it one way or another." Liam felt the blood drain from his face as he realized the true scale of the threat they faced. These survivors were no mere scavengers, but hardened killers, willing to do anything to seize control of the last vestiges of hope. This wasn't just about the cure anymore. This was a fight for the survival of the human race. And he was right in the middle of it. Liam watched in horror as the scared warlord and his men surrounded them, weapons raised. The grizzled leader of his group, Gus, stood his ground, refusing to back down, even in the face of such overwhelming force. "So what's it gonna be?" He growled, eyes narrowed. "You gonna hand it over nice and easy, or do we have to get messy?" Liam felt panic rise in his throat. The cure, the last chance to save humanity, and these brutish thugs wanted to take it for themselves. He opened his mouth to plead with Gus not to give in, but the older man shot him a warning glare, silencing him. "All right, you've got us," he said, his voice resigned slowly. He reached into his pack and withdrew a vial filled with a clear liquid, the precious cure. Holding it out, he fixed the warlord with a steely gaze. "Here's what you want now, let us go." The warlord snatched the vial from Gus' hand, a victorious grin stretching across his scared face. "Pleasure doing business with ya," he drawled. "But you didn't really think I'd let you walk away, did you?" Before Liam could react, the warlord's men opened fire, a hail of bullets tearing through the air. Gus and the others scattered for cover, but Liam was frozen in place, his mind reeling from the betrayal. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the ground, hurling Liam backwards. He struck the pavement hard, the breath knocked from his lungs as he gasped for air. A familiar voice reached his ears. "Liam." He looked up to see his mother, Sarah, battered and bloodied, but very much alive, emerging from the smoke, a rocket launcher braced against her shoulder. "Mom," he croaked, staring at her in disbelief. "No time to explain," she snapped, hauling him to his feet. "We'd got to get that cure back." Liam hardly dared to believe it. She was alive, but then the utter intensity in her eyes registered, and he knew this was no time for questions. Nodding, he hefted his machete and followed her as she charged back into the fray. The battle that ensued was a brutal one, as Sarah unleashed a relentless assault on the warlord and his thugs. Liam fought beside her, slashing and hacking with a fervor born of desperation. Together, they carved a path through the enemy lines, inch by agonizing inch. Finally, Sarah caught sight of the warlord, clutching the vial of cure, and with a primal scream, she launched herself at him. The two grappled fiercely, each determined to be the one to emerge victorious. In the end, it was Sarah who gained the upper hand, prying the vial from the warlord's grasp as he slumped to the ground unconscious. But even as she held the cure aloft in triumph, Liam knew their battle was far from over. For the true threat had only just begun to reveal itself. Clutching the precious vial of cure, Sarah ushered Liam and the remaining survivors away from the crumbling compound. Their victory had been hard won, but Liam could see the worry etched on his mother's face as they hurried through the ruined streets. "What is it?" he panted as they ran. She glanced at him, her expression grim. "The zombies, they've mutated," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We need to get this cure to a functional lab before it's too late." Liam felt a chill run down his spine as he recalled the horrors had witnessed, the shambling undead horde that seemed to grow more relentless. With each passing day, whatever had happened clearly went beyond the simple virus. These creatures were evolving, somehow becoming more intelligent, more dangerous. As if summoned by his thoughts, a new sound reached his ears, a deep guttural moan that seemed to reverberate through the very air around them. He froze, eyes wide, as the ground began to tremble beneath their feet. Sarah grabbed his arm, yanking him forward. "Hurry," she cried, "they're coming." Liam didn't need to be told twice. He poured on the speed, following the others as they raced through the ruins to escape. But at every turn, the moans grew louder, the ground shaking more violently. They rounded a corner, and Liam gasped in horror. Before them stood a towering horde of the mutated zombies, their pale flesh stretched taut over gnarled limbs. Their eyes were sunken pits of malevolence, and their jaws hung open in a nightmarish parody of a grin. As one they surged forward, a tidal wave of rotting bodies and snapping teeth. Sarah thrust the cure into Liam's hands. "Protect that with your life," she yelled, drawing her rifle. Then she turned to face the oncoming horde. The others opened fire, raining bullets down on the mutants, but it was no use. The creatures shrugged off the impacts like they were nothing. Liam watched in mounting terror as his mother and the others were slowly but surely overwhelmed by the press of undead flesh. He clutched the vial to his chest as the horde closed in around him, his mind racing with desperation. How was he going to get the cure to safety? Desperately, he cast about, searching for any avenue of escape, but they were completely surrounded, no way out. Then his gaze settled on a towering barricade of twisted metal and rubble, blocking their path to freedom. An idea began to form in his mind. Even as the zombies drew closer, he forced himself to remain calm. Now was not the time to panic. He glanced down at the vial in his hands, the last hope for humanity. He couldn't fail, not after everything they'd been through. Stealing his resolve, he turned and raced towards the barricade, praying he wasn't too late to save them all. Liam cradled the vial of cure as he raced through the ruined streets, the relentless moans of the mutant horde echoing all around him. He knew he had to get this precious cargo to safety, but with the zombies closing in on all sides, escape seemed impossible. As he neared the towering barricade blocking their path, he spotted an opening, a glimmer of hope. Gritting his teeth, he poured on the speed, ignoring the burning in his lungs and the ache in his limbs. Reaching the barricade, he threw himself against it, grunting with the effort to haul himself over the twisted metal and debris. Just as he reached the top, a clawed hand shot out, snagging his ankle. He gasped in terror as he felt himself being dragged back down into the horde. Mustering every ounce of strength, Liam swung the vial with all his might, sending it arcing over the barricade. Before the zombie could pull him fully back down, the cure disappeared from view, and Liam felt a surge of desperate hope that it had made it to the other side. The next moments were a blur as he fought against the grasping hands, teeth bared in feral snarls. Clinging to the lip of the barricade, he kicked and thrashed, finally breaking free and tumbling down the other side. He landed hard, gasping for breath, but still clutching the vial tightly to his chest. Glancing back, he saw the mutant zombies throwing themselves at the barrier in a futile attempt to reach him. Their howls of frustration filled the air, and Liam allowed himself a weary smile. They may have kept the cure from the others, but had succeeded in getting it to safety. Mom, he breathed, suddenly remembering the others who had stayed behind to cover his escape. His heart sank as he realized he had no idea what had become of them. Steeling himself, he turned and hurried down the rubble-strewn street, searching for any sign of survivors. Rounding a corner, he nearly collided with a group of heavily armed people who immediately leveled their weapons at him. Hands shaking, he held up the vial. "Hey, I have the cure," he panted. "I need to find a lab or something to synthesize it." The leader, a grizzled man with a hardened expression, studied him for a long moment, then nodded gruffly. "Follow us," he said. "There's a hospital not far from here that might still be operational." Liam fell into step beside the group, his mind racing. Was his mother still alive? Had the others made it too? Or had they all been overrun by the horde? He clung to the vial as they hurried through the streets, his knuckles white with the force of his grip. As they reached the hospital, Liam felt a glimmer of hope. The building appeared largely intact, and he could see people moving about inside. Survivors. He realized maybe they could help him find a way to mass-produce the cure. But just as they reached the entrance, a new sound reached his ears, one that chilled him to the core, a sound that spoke of an enemy far more terrifying than any zombie. The moans of the mutant horde were drawing nearer, and Liam knew their battle was far from over. As the group raced into the hospital, Liam paused to catch his breath, his heart pounding in his ears. The grizzled leader, Gus, fixed him with a stern gaze. "We need to get that cure synthesized fast," he said, his voice gruff. "The mutants are closing in, and we're sitting ducks out here." Liam nodded, clutching the precious vial tightly. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice quavering. "But what about the others?" "My mother, she..." Gus held up a hand, cutting him off. "They'll have to fend for themselves," he said bluntly. "Right now, our priority is making sure this cure gets made." Liam opened his mouth to protest, but the look in Gus' eyes silenced him. The older man clearly cared about his people, but he was also a pragmatist, hardened by the horrors of this new world. Arguing wouldn't do any good. They needed to focus on the task at hand. Nodding reluctantly, Liam allowed himself to be ushered deeper into the hospital, desperate to find a way to save what was left of humanity, even as a part of him ached with worry for his mother's fate. As they searched for a functioning lab, Liam was struck by the eerie silence that permeated the building. There were signs of recent activity, medical equipment scattered about and half-finished experiments, but no sign of the staff or patients. Gus must have noticed his confusion because he leaned in, his voice low. "This place was supposed to be a refuge, a last stronghold," he said, "but something tells me we weren't the only ones with that idea." Liam's blood ran cold as the implication sank, and someone else had gotten here first, and judging by the lack of survivors, they hadn't come in peace. A shiver of foreboding ran down his spine. Whatever had happened here, it couldn't be good. At last, they found a lab that appeared to be mostly intact. Gus and the others immediately set to work examining the equipment and samples. Liam hovered anxiously watching as they tried to decipher the complex formulas and machinery. Hurry, he urged, his gaze darting nervously towards the entrance as the distant moans of the mutant horde grew louder. We don't have much time. Gus shot him a warning look. Fix your eyes on that cure, son, he said tightly. That's our only hope right now. Anything else has to wait. Liam swallowed hard and nodded, turning his attention back to the lab. But as the group pored over the equipment, a sense of unease began to grow within him. Something wasn't right about this place. There were no signs of a struggle, no bodies. The staff had simply vanished. Suddenly, a noise reached his ears, a faint rustling from the shadows behind them. Whirling around, Liam caught a flash of movement, but before he could react, a figure lunged out of the darkness. Liam cried out in shock as his friend Damon tackled him to the ground, a vial of cure slipping from his grasp. Damon, what are you doing? He gasped, trying to fend off the other man's attack. But Damon's only response was a feral snarl as he brought his hands up around Liam's throat. Gus and the others whirled around, weapons raised, but Damon was too fast, throwing himself in front of Liam, shielding the vial with his body. Liam stared up at his friend in horror as the pieces fell into place. Damon had been working with the warlord all along, betraying them for the cure. Tears stung his eyes as he realized that everything had been through, the sacrifices made had all been for nothing. As the mutant horde drew ever closer, Liam knew they were running out of time. With Damon guarding the cure, they were trapped and utterly helpless to stop the coming apocalypse. Liam struggled futilely against Damon's iron grip, his lungs burning as the other man's hands tightened around his throat. Gus and the others shouted and fired their weapons, but Damon remained steadfast, shielding the precious vial of cure with his own body. Tears of anguish and betrayal stung Liam's eyes as he realized the horrible truth. Damon had been working with the warlord all along, intent on delivering the cure into the hands of their enemies. The last hope for humanity was slipping through their fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Just as Liam felt consciousness slipping away, a surge of determination welled up within him. No, he thought desperately, I can't let it end like this, not after everything Mom sacrificed. With a burst of strength, he drove his knee into Damon's gut, forcing the other man to loosen his grip. Gasping for air, Liam shoved him away, then snatched up the vial before Damon could recover. Liam fled deeper into the hospital, the precious cure clutched tightly to his chest. Gus and the others broke off their engagement with Damon to pursue him, voices raised in frantic shouts, Liam, bring that back here. But Liam didn't dare stop. He had to get the cure to safety no matter what. As he rounded a corner, a sudden movement in the shadows caused him to freeze in his tracks. Emerging from the gloom were the mutated zombies, their pale flesh and glowing eyes, a horrific sight to behold. Liam felt his heart sink. The creatures must have tracked them here, drawn by the commotion. He braced himself for the attack, but to his amazement, the zombies made no move to advance. Instead, they simply stood there staring at him with an unsettling intelligence. Liam hesitated, uncertainly unsure of what to make of their strange behavior. Then a daring idea took root in his mind. If they don't see me as a threat, maybe I can use them against the others. He glanced down at the vial in his hand, a desperate gambit, but it was his only chance. Taking a deep breath, Liam stepped forward, offering the cure to the mutant horde. The zombies surged forward as one, but to his shock, they didn't try to seize the vial. Instead, they formed a protective cordon around him, shielding him from view. Liam allowed himself a fleeting smile. So it worked, he breathed now. He just had to hope the creatures would obey his commands. Steeling his nerves, he turned and raced back the way he had come, the undead horde trailing in his wake. Bursting back into the lab, he found Gus and the others locked in a desperate battle with Damon. The traitor whirled to face him, eyes wild, when he saw the mutant zombies at Liam's back. Impossible, he snarled as the creatures swept past Liam to engage him and the others. In the chaos that followed, Liam watched in awe as the zombies turned on their own kind, tearing into the survivors with savage efficiency. Damon tried to fight back, but he was quickly overwhelmed, his anguished screams echoing through the halls. With the traitor dealt with, Liam hurried to Gus' side, pressing the vial of cure into the older man's hands. "Get this to a lab," he said urgently. "We need to start mass-producing it right away." Gus stared at him in bewilderment, then glanced towards the mutant horde, a look of dawning comprehension spreading across his weathered features. "I don't believe it," he breathed. Liam gave him a weary smile. "I'll hold them off," he said. "Just go." Gus hesitated for a heartbeat, then nodded grimly, hurrying away with the precious cargo. Liam watched him go, then turned to face the mutant horde, steeling himself for the coming battle. The fight was brutal and grueling, but Liam fought with a desperate ferocity fueled by the knowledge that the fate of the world hung in the balance. He struck and slashed and kicked with every ounce of strength he possessed, but the zombies kept coming, relentless and unyielding. Just as he felt his strength beginning to ebb, a familiar voice reached his ears. "Liam." He whirled around to see his mother, Sarah, emerging from the shadows, her expression a mix of shock and pride. She took in the scene before her, then rushed to the side, weapons blazing as she joined the fray. Mother and son fought side by side, cutting a path through the horde inch by agonizing inch. Liam could feel his energy flagging, but he refused to give in, not when they were so close to victory. At last the last of the mutants fell, and Sarah enveloped him in a fierce embrace. "You're alive," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Liam clung to her, tears streaming down his face. But the reunion was short-lived as the sound of approaching footsteps reached their ears. Gus had returned, his face a mask of grim determination. "We've done it," he said. "We've synthesized a cure, but there's a problem. The world is lost if we don't get it out there fast." Liam felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the true scale of the threat. They faced the fate of the entire planet rested on their shoulders, and the battle was far from over.